The first sin is killing off Umbrella way too soon and f***ing off screen. Being arguably one of the best known gaming corporations and pretty much the main antagonist throughout the original trilogy, Code Veronica and Zero, Umbrella shaped the entire series and there was always talk of bringing them down. But then Resident Evil 4 came along and Umbrella was suddenly done because of falling stocks. I mean, it is pretty realistic, but just a massive letdown. We could have had multiple games focused on exploring and infiltrating Umbrella bases to slowly take them out and end it all with an epic showdown, but no, we got nothing. It's especially sinful if we consider how much bringing them down was hyped up in multiple games, like at the end of both Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica. Capcom is seriously doing a great job at taking care of the franchise, but I honestly can't understand how anyone thought that this might be a good idea. The second sin is cutting way too much content in the Resident Evil 3 remake. The original had you explore major parts of the city, including the up and downtown of Raccoon City, the RPD, the clock tower, the hospital, the park, and more. The remake in contrast features a smaller and more linear city part, of which like half of it is already in the demo of the game. Apart from that, the clock tower and park are gone, the Dead Factory is replaced with a clone of the lab area from the Resident Evil 2 remake, and a few additions, like the sewers, aren't that enjoyable in my opinion and worse than the original content. Additionally, it's also missing all the randomized events, which were plentiful in the original, the choices and different endings, some bosses, mercenaries, and more. The only things that were improved at all were obviously the graphics and controls, the dodge, and arguably the characters and hospital. The rest was worse. I don't hate the game, especially because I went in with adjusted expectations and bought the game for a much reduced price, but it's sinful how they ruined this remake. The third sin is the lack of item boxes in Resident Evil 0. The game has two likable protagonists, a somewhat interesting story, beautiful graphics, and a cool twist of the formula with two playable characters at the same time. Unfortunately, it also replaced the iconic item boxes with putting items on the ground. But also not too many on the same ground, because there's also a limited amount of items you can place in one room, so then you have to go to the next room and place the other items there. I'm not saying it's the only issue of the game, but definitely one of the biggest and most stupid ones. It's already one of the hardest and longest fixed camera angle games in the series, and the added backtracking of having to run back and forth to move your items is making it even worse. There are some advantages to this, for example like just dropping an item off your inventory if you need to pick up a key item, but most of the time it's just annoying and hurts the overall experience. The fourth sin is the ridiculous crate pushing thing in the fixed camera angle games. Oh, we have to get across this gap. How about we move this stupid crate through this whole f***ing corridor? Oh, there's a fire in the way. How about we move a f***ing crate onto it to get past? Oh, here's a f***ing puzzle that just consists of moving stupid crates around. Yay! Some of you might think that I'm being a bit overdramatic right now, but I think it's truly one of the worst things to happen to human mankind. Right after Silent Hill Ascension. That one is even worse. Thankfully, Capcom realized this as well and changed it from Resident Evil 4 onwards. Finally no crates anymore. No, but seriously, this usually only happens once or twice per game and they don't take up that much time, but this always breaks the immersion for me and has aged horribly. The fifth sin is that you aren't subscribed to the channel yet. No, I'm actually just kidding and I have no idea if you are or not. But apparently a lot of you haven't yet, so feel free to do so if you're enjoying this video. Thank you. The actual fifth sin is the handling of the side characters. There are plenty of great characters like Carlos, Billy or Jake that appear once and then never again. This is extra annoying if we consider the, let's say, not too interesting new side characters that are introduced in almost every new game, that could easily be replaced by some of the older ones. This is less of an issue now with the Ethan storyline, mainly because there are barely any side characters apart from the villains anyway, but it was definitely sinful in the early 2010s. Just imagine, instead of the two clowns in Revelations 1, we had Carlos. Life would be instantly better. Although even worse than the complete disappearance of many of them is how they just kill off plenty of other ones, while the main characters remain fine for decades. I'm not saying that I want all of the main protagonists to die, but there's no point in rooting for new characters if you know that they most likely die or are never to be seen again. The sixth sin is making the hideous brown and green filters of the 7th console generation popular. With the release of Resident Evil 4 in 2005, Capcom made plenty of things popular that went on to shape the whole gaming space until today. We got the over-the-shoulder camera, that is used in seemingly every single action game since then, QTEs, that were completely overused in action games for literally a decade, and of course also the weird brown and green filters of the generation. Resident Evil 4 looked very brown to convey the spooky atmosphere, and it worked great. It was my first proper horror game, and the mood in the beginning hours creeped me out to hell. Unfortunately, plenty of games decided to copy it, just in worse and for no reason at all. Capcom's own Resident Evil 5 was green and very washed out, GTA was brown, Gears of War was brown, Fallout basically consisted of a single color per game, and hell, even racing games suffered from this. It was great for Resident Evil 4, but it's definitely sinful that a whole generation looks like shit because of this. The seventh sin is the handling of Ethan's face. For Resident Evil 7, Capcom decided to go back to the survival horror roots and change the perspective to the first person for the first time in the mainline games. But they couldn't just do it normally. They decided to hide Ethan's face for the entirety of both 7 and Village. And not only did this hurt the player's connection to Ethan, especially in Resident Evil 7, but also destroyed some of the more emotional scenes at the end of Village and its DLC. Instead of just having some cool cutscenes, they thought it would be a great idea to cover his face at all times in the most stupid ways. Resident Evil doesn't attempt an emotional story often, but then they do for once and actually succeed, just to waste it like this. I still enjoyed it for what it was, but this definitely hurt my overall experience, because it was just so goofy to keep hiding his face in every single scene. Especially because it would have been even better if we finally got to see his face at the end of Village. But no. The 8th sin is not making a proper multiplayer Resident Evil after all these years and constantly delivering titles literally no one wanted nor asked for. Outbreak File 1 and 2 are great, but unfortunately they were ahead of their time, and I believe I speak for everyone watching when I say that I want a remake or remaster of these games for the current gen with functional online play. But instead we got Umbrella Corps, a bad third-person shooter, Resident Evil Resistance, which was bundled with the RE3 Remake and isn't too good either, and wasn't supported anymore after half a year, and Reverse, another bad third-person shooter no one asked for, with heavy balancing issues and no players. Capcom just needs to do a good multiplayer game in the style of the mainline games, for example like Outbreak, and everyone would be happy. But instead they are constantly trying bullshit no one wants. It's just a shame, really. The 9th sin is the horrible handling of villains in Resident Evil 0. I mean, I kinda like it, simply because I can laugh about it, but it's a joke what they did to some characters. James Marcus, one of the co-founders of Umbrella, researcher in the development of the T-Virus, director of Umbrella's training facility, and main antagonist of the whole game, was borderline reduced to an opera singer. Meanwhile, Wesker and Birkin, one of the most influential and important villains of the whole series, act like elementary school bullies, resulting in this horrible cutscene.
Oh, time to die, Doctor.
I will take over your research.
Wesker.
Wow. Now we already got 2 reasons for the dislike of Resident Evil 0. The last and 10th sin of today is the horrible inventory of Resident Evil 6. The full-on survival horror games all have a similar and fairly simple inventory. You've got your items, health, files and map. Nothing spectacular, but it works well and looks good. Then RE4 came around and changed a lot, but it's widely regarded as the best inventory of the series. I mean, to be fair, this is mainly due to the Tetris minigame that is integrated into it, but to be fair again, it is pretty fun. Resident Evil 5 after was already a bit messy, because it didn't pause the game anymore due to co-op, but I really liked that I could use the number keys on my keyboard to change between items. Well, and Resident Evil 6 is just annoying, confusing and sadistic bullshit with overly complicated controls. I wouldn't mind it as much if it paused the game at least, but just like 5 it doesn't because of the whole co-op thing. I'm glad they never continued it, because it's easily my least favorite inventory of the whole series and doesn't fit the fast pace of the game at all. It's just way too complicated and slow. Call it a skill issue, but it's insane that the inventory has such a steep learning curve, while it should be pretty much second nature after so many Resident Evil games. I wish they had just copied Resident Evil 5's inventory and called it a day. Literally sinful. Well, what do you think is the worst sin of the list, and do you guys want a second part of this? Tell me in the comments. Please also consider to subscribe, like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you and see you next time.